While it is a fact that not all individuals who follow the faiths of Judaism, Islam, or Christianity become financially affluent as a direct consequence of their faith, it is equally valid to state that anyone who abides by biblical financial principles can achieve economic prosperity. These principles, often derived from scriptures and religious texts, provide essential guidelines on how to manage wealth and promote financial stability. Just as there are laws of physics that apply universally, such as gravity, so do these financial principles. They serve as universal that are applicable to everyone, irrespective of their backgrounds. The law of gravity, for instance, applies uniformly to all inhabitants of the earth. Anything that ascends must inevitably descend. This is a law that we can all understand and accept, irrespective of our individual faiths or belief systems. Similarly, there are certain actions that predictably attract specific reactions. Take, for example, if you were to swim in shark-infested waters with an open wound, the blood would instinctively attract sharks. Or if you were to run across an open field during a lightning storm with a metal rod held high above your head, you'd invariably attract lightning. In the same vein, biblical financial principles operate. They are predictable, reliable, and when followed correctly, they inevitably lead to prosperity. These principles might include concepts such as tithing, honest work, generosity, saving, and investing wisely. But today we are going to focus on specific entrepreneurial principles. Just as you wouldn't expect to be bitten by a shark or struck by lightning without doing something to attract it, you should not expect to become wealthy unless you're actively following these principles. The importance of following these biblical principles cannot be overstated. They serve as a roadmap to financial success and stability, providing guidance on how to earn, save, invest, and spend money. These principles encourage discipline, wisdom, and ethical behavior, which are all critical elements in managing wealth. Thus, understanding and adhering to these principles is a step towards achieving financial prosperity. But what are the biblical principles of financial prosperity? Are there any biblical examples of people who practiced certain principles that resulted in financial wealth? Let's delve into this subject and see what the Bible says about being wealthy. There are many examples of rich people in the Bible, from Job to Abraham, from David to Solomon. Although we can certainly cover the practices and results of their wealth, today we will focus on the practices of Joseph. But first, a backstory. Joseph is a son of Jacob, a grandson of Isaac, and a great-grandson of Abraham. However, Joseph didn't inherit any riches from his forefathers. In fact, Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers. Yet because of his obedience to God and his dedication to living a righteous life, everything he put his hands on prospered. According to the Bible, Joseph was put in charge of Egypt and was made second to Pharaoh himself after God gave him the meaning of Pharaoh's dream. In Genesis 41:34, God is giving Joseph the interpretation of Pharaoh's dream, and Pharaoh is instructed to follow certain principles to protect him from the famine to come. The instruction is to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the years of abundance and store it. It should be held in reserve for the 7 years of famine so that the country may not be ruined. This is a very simple principle. Save 20% of your income for hard times, yet most people don't save anything at all. The first biblical principle of acquiring wealth is to save 20% of your income. But this is just the beginning. Certainly this will help you buffer hard times, but it definitely won't make you wealthy. Yet being able to sustain yourself during a famine is very important. More important is what you do during the famine. During the famine, Joseph didn't simply give away everything he had collected. Genesis 41:56 says, "When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold the grain to the Egyptians. All the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph." During a famine, you need to have a highly demanded product. Joseph understood that the highest demanded product was going to be grain. Remember when the COVID pandemic struck the world? Many people had purchased stockpiles of face masks and sanitizer and sold it at a surplus. Having a highly demanded product to sell is a very important principle. During the real estate market crash of 2008, many investors that had saved up a lot of cash began to purchase houses for pennies on the dollar and later sold those houses at a profit. Without having saved up during the good times, they would not have been able to acquire the properties during the crash. Let's dive in deeper to see how Joseph's business worked and how business works in general. In Genesis 46:14, the Bible goes on to explain more principles Joseph practiced during the famine. It says that Joseph had collected all the money that was to be found in Egypt and Canaan from selling grain. Joseph then began to barter with the people and trade grain for their livestock. Now, Joseph had all the money and all the livestock. Then, people were then willing to exchange their land and labor for food. Joseph received all the land in exchange for food. The people were reduced to servitude. This is a hard reality of business. Furthermore, Joseph decided to give them seed to plant and told them to give 1/5 of the produce to Pharaoh, and the other 4/5 would be used for their own food and planting. So, now Joseph had acquired all the money, land and cattle. He then made it so that the people no longer needed to get food from him, but rather were able to produce food for themselves once again. Smart people who realized the principles were then able to practice that very principle for themselves. Out of 4/5, they should save 1/5 and use the other 3/5 for eating and planting, saving up grain for themselves for the next famine. He also practiced charity by not taking the land from the priests and gave them a regular allotment so that the priests were provided for. Being prosperous entails giving to charity. It's a core component of financial success that goes beyond just accumulating wealth. It's understanding that prosperity isn't simply about personal gain, but involves contributing to society, sharing what we have with those less fortunate, and using our resources to make a difference. Another crucial aspect of prosperity is ensuring that your workers have a sense of freedom. It's about enabling them to escape the chains of their jobs, fostering an environment where they feel valued and not enslaved by their duties. This involves creating opportunities for growth and development, encouraging autonomy, and promoting a work-life balance. Interestingly, most employees fall into the trap of perpetual labor, trapped in a cycle of earning and spending without making any real progress. However, a select few will adopt the practices of their bosses. They will learn, adapt, and gradually transform into entrepreneurs themselves. These individuals don't just follow what's taught, they imbibe the very essence of business principles, mirroring the actions of successful business owners. This is not a new concept. In fact, these were the same biblical principles followed by Joseph that led to his financial success. Remember, these principles are timeless. They transcend cultural, societal, and economic boundaries. They can be adopted by anyone, regardless of their current situation or background. And as history has proven time and again, they will always yield the same result: wealth.